Check, check.
Hello.
What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how's it going?
I'm chilling. It's first lesson that I'm doing since before Genesis, so nice to
Oh,
get back
really?
into it. Yeah, like cause I didn't have any time between Genesis and Pound, and I've just kind of been like recovering after Pound. It was pretty rough on me, so
Yeah, it was like a back-to-back. Did you have like a long queue?
along. Oh,
Like
queue for
a queue of
lessons.
lessons like in the
Um,
in the back?
I have like a long. I have like a bunch of people who wanted to hit me up for lessons, and I told them to wait until after, and then. But yours is the only one that's like time sensitive because you're trying to get it before Summit. So
Right, right.
I gave you priority for it.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, well, thanks for your time. So to sort of like outline what my goal is and the intent here is that I'm gonna be commentating at Smash Summit. I haven't think they released the commentators yet, but it's whatever. I'll be there.
You're gonna be commentating at Summit? No way! Good
That's
job,
right.
good
Here,
job,
this is
man.
the scoop. This is the scoop. and and so I was like, you know what? I think that I have a lot of strengths as a caster, but I also have weaknesses, and I just wanted to pick your brain, and because I think the way you think about the game is the way that I wish I thought about the game, and just building up on that knowledge and like also being able to pay you for your time, I think is cool because like it's valuable. I do think that. So
Yeah,
um,
appreciate that you want to do that.
So a couple things about me. I've been playing since 2014. I started in nowhere, Colorado, and then I moved to SoCal. So I've been playing a lot. I never really like had the discipline or the determination to like achieve things, but kind of that brute force of just like playing for 8 years, understanding, the ropes of the game, is where I ended up. But as far as like hard learning stuff, like percents and this and that, it's like I always thought it was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to practice and like
Mm-hmm.
discipline. Um,
I'm not a
so I
percent like a big percent person either. I think
really,
that's something I definitely need to. Well, I had like even I mean for Fox I didn't have that many percents either. A lot of times I just sort of play with kind of like looser ranges. Like I think like one of the only percents I know is that like Fox or like Falco Jab knocks down Fox at like 126 ish, I think. But I just tell myself, oh, Jab knocks down Spaceys past 130, you know?
right? Okay,
And like I know it's somewhere between 125 and 130, but like sometimes your moves are a little staled or whatever, so I try to just give myself like ranges for things that are fairly generous. Um,
interesting. Because I remember I wanted to brush up on Sheik, so I reached out to Face Roll, and he told me a lot of cool stuff. And one of them was like that 24% in Sheik Fox
mhm,
is the magic percent where I believe what knocks him down. I think F tilt.
mhm, mhm,
So you're kind of like working really hard to get to 24%, and then the game gets a little easier.
mhm.
And I've always remembered that. And so it's like, but I've also it's interesting that you say that that's not how you approach things. So I thought there's a part of me that thinks, well, everyone approaches it that way if they're on the upper level.
No, to be honest, it's a Sheik main thing. Like I kid you not. No, like and it has nothing to do with like their personalities either. It's the character. Like
Right, right.
Sheik is just like the way Spark describes it is you just wake up and there's like a list of 1,000 laws, and as long as you don't break any of those laws, she's a good character. And so
Right.
like Sheik has to work really hard to like know every single number because if forward tilt doesn't knock down, you know, you're kind of in a bad spot. Whereas like if Fox Nair doesn't knock down, you're just gonna be shining and pressing a bunch of buttons anyway. And it's like the consequences are like a lot less. And I do think that I would benefit if I learned some more percents, but I see those as like a lot more like learning specific percents for spacies I think is a lot more like high level like optimization type of stuff, and I'm not really at that level in any of the matchups yet where I'm like, oh yes, this is like this exact percent or whatever.
Interesting. So where I guess where are you then? Where do you consider yourself in sort of like the mastery of the game as you see it?
Hmm. Just in general or with Falco or
I think it's hard, right? Because you switch to Falco, but I guess with Falco, because that's who you're maining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's see. I think it's a little bit different. I think it was nice resetting with Falco because I think there were just a lot of things with Fox that I had just kind of accepted that were parts of my play, or there's just so many little things. Like I'm sure you know, playing for like 8 years, there's a lot of habits to undo if you're trying to get good. You know.
Yeah, especially if you're shit like me. I always think it's funny when I see really good players like having habits, and I'm like, that's crazy, because they're like me, but they're actually not, because like my habits are insanely broadcast. But
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got habits. Just a lot of people like everybody has their little panic habits and stuff. It's just mangoes are just better than mine or a lot of people. So like that's
right,
why like there's just like people. Everybody has like little habits that they have. I think that like a lot of times worst players just have habits that like are like you said more obvious just because they haven't really like taken the time to like consider them. But everybody has stuff like that, and like every top player, like if you look at their play, it looks super dynamic, but it's actually you know like their experience of playing the game is actually fairly similar to yours in terms of like seeing a situation and then your hands kind of just activate based on like habit stuff.
right, interesting.
Let's see. There's something else you said that I was gonna respond to, and I kind of
Talk
like
about
lost.
Falco.
Yeah, just with where I am with Falco. I think I'm at a point where I'd say I'm like 7.5 or so at the Fox matchup, and then everything else is kind of like around like a 4 or 5, maybe a little
You
bit
say 4 or
less.
5 out of 10 in terms of like proficiency, or what does that mean?
Well, like a lot of the matchups, it's kind of like, what's the best way to like describe it? Is kind of like a pyramid or something like that, where like the bottom parts of it are just way bigger and more fundamental than like the top parts of it. So I think like I have like a lot of big pieces in a lot of the matchups, but not a lot of the small parts. And I think that is like a pretty big issue with my play currently. Like a lot of times, especially against like the top players, I'm doing better than I like should kind of based on a lot of like universal skill with my Falco, like scrapping and like speed and consistency and stuff like that. But just because I have like really solid game plans and everybody's used to Falco players being dumb, like I think it helps me perform kind of like above the current level of where my Falco would like normally be.
I
Um,
see.
I do think my Falco's finally getting like pretty good in general lately. Like I'd put it as like maybe like a 7 overall now, which I'm pretty happy with.
What player in terms of like skill wise would you compare yourself on the level with as a Falco other Falco player?
Like, what do you mean?
Like, are you like who is are you like I would assume you think you're not as good as Ginger, right? Or maybe you think you and Ginger
I'm
are the
not as
same amount of
I'm
Falco
not as
skill.
complete as Ginger. So he
Right.
has way more stuff in every matchup where I was saying that like a lot of times he has like a lot more of these specific smaller things that are really important. I think I'm better at establishing like foundational stuff, and I'm kind of just like a better player overall in terms of like playing the game and like winning matches. I think I'm better. Um,
Can you explain the what that means, right? Because I think I understand. It's that like there are these dynamics in these areas. It's like you're good at winning matches, which is different from playing better, which is different from I.
well, winning. What I'm saying is that like the stuff I do, I feel like I'm like so in terms of like game plan, I think a lot of the stuff that Ginger does is a lot more like he kind of sees everything on like an even, and I don't want to speak for him, this is how I
Sure,
see it.
yeah. This is
It
all
seems like
okay.
he
Sure.
he sees everything kind of like books on a bookshelf, like everything is kind of even, and everything is just like a big list of situations to learn. And I think that I focus a lot more on like big things that will get me results, or big things that will affect the matchup more. I think I'm like better at focusing in on the important, like immediately important parts, I guess, or like emphasizing the important parts style
Right.
wise. So I think currently our Falcos kind of have this dynamic where like if I play in tournament, it's kind of like, oh, like Fiction, played solid and he did this and he won. Where there's a lot of spots with like Ginger where it's like, oh, how did he know that this connected into that in this spot, or how did he know that he could hit this exact spacing here, and there's just a lot of like, oh, this rest punish, he's thought about and stuff like that. So he has a
Yeah,
lot.
the down smash. Yeah,
So
like
yeah, like the down smash thing, like I'm nowhere close to having that level of Falco experience.
I see.
And I think that in terms of like general skill, I'm just better. Like, and I think it was clear because like my Fox was better than him when I played Fox too. I think, and I can just kind of feel it, and I could even feel it kind of like early on when I played Falco against him, like in the Ditto, like when I was like way worse at Falco, is that I would still do pretty well. Um, I
Interesting. Yeah.
don't really know a perfect way to describe it. It's like, why is Mango better than other people? And it's like,
Yeah,
well,
well, that's what we do. A lot of us try to answer ourselves, like whenever we see someone play better. I like to describe it as like if you're playing off like 1% of your capacity and someone else is 1% over you, they make you look like shit sometimes, right?
well, that's definitely true.
But sorry, I interrupted.
No, you
Uh,
didn't. I'm just kind of I'm trying to like think of a lot of stuff right now, so it's hard to like get everything super compact.
Something I want to go back to is you talked about like a pyramid as sort of the structure of melee skill in terms of like the bottom is like your food and your grains, and then it's the basic fundamentals, and it gets more granular and more
Mm-hmm.
specific as it goes up,
Yes.
and that implies that you can fill the pyramid eventually. Do you believe in that? Like you can color in the whole pyramid and be like I don't know, entirely complete, or is it
I mean,
unsolvable?
I do think Melee is definitely like a solvable game. Like I think the number of situations that are solved has been steadily rising. And like we know there's not an infinite number of situations in the game. So, you know, if we keep solving situations, eventually we're going to get to a point where it's like significantly more solved than now. Like it's like you can't fully solve it on like a human level because of like reaction time and playing and stuff like that. I didn't really fully get to go into the whole like winning matches type thing either, but we can probably go back to that like later.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, like let's go into it now. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this kind of like okay, so it's a little bit like the reason why someone is better than someone else at like mid level is just really different from why someone is better than somebody at high level, I think, because of like the whole like pyramid type thing. Um I think that okay, so it's super duper ultra top level, the game like Mango Zane type thing, the game is all about the not doing the obvious thing. That is like the entire thing. Like if I beat Zane or Mango beats Zane or something, Mango can't beat Zane, but like if one of us beats Zane, it's exclusively because we avoided doing the obvious option like 100 times in a row.
I
And
see.
because so at low level, it's all about doing the right thing. You just want to do the right thing. And then at mid level, you kind of get to this like, well, I kind of want to do the right thing, and I kind of want to punish my opponent for doing like bad things, and then that's kind of like builds up. But then at the top, like basically, if there's a situation and I see that situation and I'm like, oh, in this situation, the best option is to do this, and if that option has any counter, the opponent will usually counter it. So for instance, like a lot of times if you're playing Mango and he kind of gives you a whiff punish, like it's not super set in stone, but it looks like a whiff punish, you should usually not take it. You kind of start playing for the next situation. Um,
Right.
so I have like kind of like a theory of melee built around like positional transformations, because the idea is that like you have reaction time, your opponent has reaction time, you want a good position for you, and they want a good position for them, and you're kind of both like trying to be like, I'm gonna move here, And if they move here, now that position's better for me, and that's your read. And it's rather than like a read where you're like hitting or getting hit. A lot of the reads are like trying to put yourself in a good position. And so a lot of times when you're in a situation where you're like, oh, the obvious answer here is to, jump in and down air, then you have to be like, okay, so if the one thing I can't do is jump in and down air, because that will probably get covered, but what is a different positional transformation that would potentially put me in an advantage if they counter it, and not put me in a disadvantage if they don't? So you start being like, are you going to cover the obvious option? If you do, I will be at a slight advantage, and if you don't, we're still even. And so you start trying to find these little advantages based on that and moving into like good positions. And I think that Ginger has an issue where he kind of defaults to like the good thing, and it can potentially make him a little predictable, where he just wants like, no, if I keep doing the good things, I'll win. And a lot of times that gets abused by somebody like Mango when they play, where like especially by Mango, where him doing the right option becomes the wrong option, but not in like a direct way. And that's the thing that makes it, I think, really hard for people to analyze, is that it's not like you did A and you did the counter to A, so you win. It's like you did A, or your opponent does A to you, and then you're like over here doing F in a way that would put you in a slightly better F if he does A. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when you say A to F, you're talking about like the sort of the lineage of things that are good to things that are less good. Or you're just
I'm just using it as just
just
anything else. Just there's just like a lot of spots where your opponent expects you to play a situation, and they're very prepared at the higher levels to win those situations that occur. And like you don't really always want to be winning situations that you and your opponent agree on. A lot of times at the top level, it's about pretending to agree to play a certain mix-up or situation and then not playing it at all, and letting your opponent kind of deal with the fact that like they had to prepare for a situation that didn't really come up.
Right. Okay, yeah. So, okay, let me try to rephrase this in a way like that I can, like Michael Barbaro would. It's like,
yeah, I'm having trouble doing it in like the perfectly
fine.
concise way. So.
No, I think you're actually being very concise. I'm just trying to like put it in a box because I'm writing it down as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just tell me if I'm like picking it
Okay,
up.
okay.
It's just like top level melee is built around an expectation of what the game has been up until this point in terms of skill, understanding, counters, and options.
Mm-hmm.
And the top level, because everyone is already good at that, it becomes about circumventing the known expectations of the best thing in order to get small advantages. I think in StarCraft they call it cutting corners. Right? I watch a lot of Brood War, and it's like
that's such a good comparison. That's such a good comparison.
That's what Artosis says.
That's like what it's all about. That's literally it.
To cut corners. Okay. This is good. This makes sense to me now.
But it's not cutting corners in the sense of like it's not so direct in the sense of like taking because in StarCraft it's very cut and dry in that sense of cutting corners, where you're like taking a risk in one way to like create a better situation eventually if this thing isn't punished. And that is certainly like part of melee neutral, but it's more about the idea that like, well, my opponent knows that this can be ready by 5 minutes, so I want to make it look like I'll be ready at 5 minutes, but I have a different plan at like 5.5.
Right.
Rather than like, well, they're ready at 5, so I'll cut some corners and be there at 4:45, which is still useful and still happens. A lot of times when Marth does like wave dash forward smash, it's kind of like a call out of like, well, you're not going to punish me during this time, and then I get a big move out because I kind of cut that corner. So maybe I overstated maybe I overstated what a good comparison it is. But it's good to think of it in like that direction, where it's like that, like you're trying to defy the expectations of your high level opponent.
Okay. And so let me ask you then, if that can be considered as like the rubric of how, or sort of the basic of like how top level melee is played as a spar, when at what level does that start to not be the case when you're moving downward, right? Let's talk about like your top 20, top 30 players. Is that still applicable, or does it have to keep going down to like your bottom 100 players?
I'd
I get
say I only have to think about those plays against people who are at the level where they could like beat top 5, 10 level players. Like I would say someone like S2J still has it. Um, Somebody like Magi, you don't really have to do something like that against.
why is that?
No
Does
offense to
she?
Magi,
Yeah,
because Magi is
but
really good, but
none of.
yeah,
By the way, if we're ever talking, because I know you're streaming, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, whoever's listening, like it, whenever we talk about like this person being better than this person or like not good at this, it's not like shade. It's just more of like trying to understand on a linear level of like what is missing in their game plan. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
interested in your thoughts on Magi because it's like I feel like she's like always really close, but there's an element missing in your opinion.
Well, I mean, Magi just isn't at the level where she's doing the non-obvious things. Magi does the right options very well, and that's kind of where
Okay.
she's at. Which I would see who else is kind of at that sort of. And the thing is people can get really, really good at what they do and kind of circumvent that whole thing too a little bit.
Right.
Like Moki. Like Moki is so good at kind of his own like speed and being like not on quite the same frequency as everyone else because he learned the game a little independently and plays it very like kind of uniquely. And so he can kind of get away. I don't think he really plays the expectation game much, but because he's so fast and good at the game and kind of like doesn't play super standard, he can kind of get away with that up to a top level. But I do think that is primarily what prevents him from being as good as the other top players. Because in terms of like, and in the sense I mean like Zane and Mango type level.
Yeah, like the top.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess in your opinion then, let's take our Magi's and our Mokis and our I'm trying to name a non-spacey that's in the same spot. Even like our Sparks. Um
Yeah, yeah.
wait,
That's a good one.
what do you think the timeline is to go from where they are now to taking being a real strong threat to like the top 5, top 10 that when they usually aren't? Can it happen overnight? Is it a week minimum? Is it a couple months before that is understood? What do you think?
I think it's just you need like a moment of understanding, and then you can build off of that. But you can't really force anyone to have that moment, like because if I told Moki like you need to be like trickier and defy expectations, it wouldn't really like line up because he feels like he's already doing that. But when you watch his play, it's a little bit more straightforward than that. It's just like he kind of has these like little habits, but he does them so well that like it works really well for him. What was the question exactly? Let me.
Yeah, it was just more like if I'm let's say I'm Moki or I'm Magi and I
Let's
am
use
like
Magi because I know her a little bit better as a player.
sure, yeah, and you both play Falco now.
Yeah.
Where it's like it you realize she's at this we can call it a plateau. It's kind of a condescending word, but it's like it's a physical sort of barrier to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Um and you're understanding this theory that
Okay, okay. I actually have a good way. So people can get it earlier, but the way you can kind of like it's one of those things in like a game where it's like if you don't find the secret early on, eventually they just give it to you. Where it's
yeah.
like if you don't find it early enough, which I would say most people don't unless they have like a super ultra top player as like a close friend or something. Like, you usually get it when you get right below that level. Like, you're knocking on the door, and you can't seem to get in for a while, and it starts to kind of dawn on you that, like, wait a
Okay.
minute. Every time I do the right thing, I die. Like, it's basically like you need to be good enough to do pretty well against Zane, but not well enough that you feel like you have a chance. And if you're just stuck at that level for long enough, you start being like, something's wrong here. Because Zane is definitely the best player in the world at punishing the normal options, along with Mango being the second best at it.
Interesting. Okay. Um. Okay. What? Let's let's talk about Jmook.
Okay.
What what happened in your perspective? Jmook went on this insane god run. And what did he do? How did he get there?
Okay, so what was his run again? It was like Laud into somebody. Who what was it? Do you remember?
I have to look it up actually.
Plup, Laud, None, IBDW. That's what somebody said. Okay, so what I would say is what happened with Jmook is basically, so he's been capable of getting like the Plup win for a little bit on like Fox, especially because Plup, he has a tendency to be a little disrespectful in his play unless you really force it out of him. Like he just really likes being very like aggro and kind of just smashing you to death. And I think that Jmook is kind of like, it's always been an issue for Sheik mains with like the kind of like the Ditto, even with like a secondary Fox. It's kind of like ugh, like just it's kind of like a weird matchup. So I think that basically what happened with Jmook is a player who's been really good for a while and been like underperforming for a while, kind of got a good win in a position where, like, so he got the Plup win, and it's like, yeah, let's go Jmook, and now he's feeling kind of good, right? And then his next set to play is Laud, and it's like, so you just beat Plup, and now you're gonna play Laud in Sheik Peach, and you're like, oh, okay, wait, I can probably do this, you know? And then you beat Laud, and you're like, wait a minute, what if I'm just really good? Like, what if, like, all my, like, and so it's, like, basically a lot of the patterns that Jmook has been building all this time that have kind of been held back by lack of attendance and lack of, you know, confidence in bracket, kind of, like, got, like, the shackles got released, and then it's like, well, now you're playing None. And it's like, oh, you know, Sheik Falcon, like, let's go. Like, he didn't run into any other Foxes until Cody. And, so, like, I think it's kind of like you start getting this thing where it's like Jmook clearly really likes walk up, crouch up tilt against Falcon. But, like, let's say he played None and he did walk up, crouch up tilt and just immediately got destroyed for it. He might have been, like, a little bit lost because of his, you know, because of needing to, like, kind of rework his expectations and be like, oh, wait, that's not going to work here on the big stage against None. What do I have to do? But he just kind of got lucky in the sense that, like, he played players where the things he did happened to be working. And so if you've been building all these patterns and you're like a super tech skill based player and you've been building all these technical patterns for like years, and now you're in a spot and you're on the big stage and you're just throwing them out and no one's ready for it and you just keep hitting them, you just like, yeah, like, I'm just gonna press my buttons and if they hit, I'll win, you know? So I think it's like kind of like a snowball of confidence in his stuff, coupled with no one really putting a stop to that confidence. And then I think like he had like, and then he was just playing like out of his mind hot against Zayn, and Zayn hadn't adapted yet. So like if Zayn was a little bit worse, Zayn could have just lost that first set, but Zayn is just a lot better. And despite it being kind of confusing that there's this, you know, super confident Sheik doing things that nobody else really does, you know, he managed to clutch it out, and then he was super ready in Grands. And the thing with Cody is, like, Cody's just been, like, talking up Jmook for years, and he was saying how he lost him at his first tournament. There was clearly, like, a lot of build-up on Cody's end of, like, holy moly, don't lose to Jmook, you know, you're better than this now. And Jmook is just coming in like, everything I touch is gold. Like, literally every move like, he four-stocked None. Like, None didn't, like, make him question himself a single time. You know,
No,
he
yeah.
just he just does his pattern and it works, and you're like, dude, I don't have to question anything, just let it flow. And so I think if anybody had kind of broken Jmook's flow, which Zane super did in Grands, then like he would have to kind of flounder and like kind of get to it, and like the lack of high level tournament experience at majors would start coming up more. But he got to like literally just sit there, and like Cody kept running into his moves, and he's always been exceptionally good at tech chasing. So you start hitting your tech chases, you feel that, you know, Cody starts getting a little bit flustered, and he just kind of did his thing, and Cody just sort of crumbled. And then he got to Zayn and was like, okay, you know, I can do this. And I don't think people are like, oh, he just choked in Grands. And it's like, no, he just got to Grands, realized Zayn had adapted. So all the, like, you know, the treasure trove of patterns he's built up this whole time are no longer working. And he doesn't have the experience level to, you know,
Find new treasures
to
right away.
yeah, to switch it up, because like it was kind of like all of this stuff kind of built up in the background for a long time, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you go in preparing for Zane when you're Jmook, right? Like you got a lot of other people to take down, and then but it that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think now, how do I say this? Do you think that? No, that's a dumb question, actually. Um, okay.
Yeah, I'm worried if somebody just watches this through from start to finish, it'll be a little incoherent on my end, but doing my
I
best.
I don't think you're incoherent. I think
Okay.
you're
There's
pretty
just so
succinct.
many little things that I feel like I feel like I could do so much better at explaining this if I got
No,
like 20 chances.
I do think you're explaining it pretty well. I'm just trying to navigate
All right,
what
as long
I'm
as
trying
you're
to.
getting it, that's what's important.
Yeah, my notepad's filling up. Um, let me think. So we got Jmook. Um, I guess it's like so from my perspective as like a shitter who like my best win is Hulka. Get fucked.
Nice.
Uh, back in the day, where it's like you always think like because you get destroyed by a good player and it makes you feel like you just picked up the game again and you're like, man, I don't know, and it's like this mysterious wall. Um, and okay, so I remember Axe when he won Smash Summit 8. He said something like, "You guys have no idea how hard it is to improve at the top level." And the thing we were just talking about a lot, where it's like the expectation, the understanding of mix-ups, you know, building on the basic foundation. What does that technically look like? Again, using Magi as an example, like Magi says, "I'm gonna fucking do this." What does she do? Does she like? Is it about like studying the VODs of these players all the time, all the time? Um,
Mm-hmm.
is that kind of the biggest component? Is just watching old sets?
You
Like
mean
if
like
she's like,
watching your own sets?
or no, if she's like old sets, I mean, like if she's like gunning for taking down Mango, is her job then understanding this theory of melee that you have at the top level to just watch what Mango does and try to out mix up him with his goofy ass mix ups?
No. What you want to do, and I say this to people like all the time basically, like the way you improve at the game is you find things that keep going wrong over and over again and you fix them. So when I'm
Okay.
watching like a match, like I recently so I played Mango like 3 days in a row before Genesis, and I kind of got bodied in the Ditto like every day out of those. And so I would just after the session, I would just sit there like pull up all 20 slippies and just kind of let them go, and I would like go on social media and kind of chill, and I would just kind of watch them for like things that kept going wrong. Like, oh, I keep getting hit by this type of approaching laser, or I keep getting hit in this spot, or I keep dropping this. And you try to find the ones that are like most significant first, the ones that kill you, or you know, stuff like that, or you drop like this really clear edge guard that you need to be hitting every time, and you just find that one thing and you fix it. And you just repeat that process, and you can get really, really, really good from that. And honestly, like, along the way, a lot of times you'll find out about these like bigger concepts and be able to like implement them just from being like, why does this thing keep repeating? and you're like, why is my opponent keep doing this? And you will eventually start seeing why somebody is hitting you with stuff. I think like the perfect example of of how nobody does this is Fox Falco, where like none of the foxes really, or like almost no fox players really understand approaching laser, because they get hit by the first laser and then they dash back to avoid the down air and they get laser shined. And I remember playing fox in that position and being like, how do you get me? And I just kept playing. And it's like,
yeah.
and it's
Well,
like,
that's what shitters do too. That's what happens every time I play with my fucking roommate Aiden. You know, he plays Sheik, and I'm like, how does this keep happening? And I don't apply myself to solving that small problem.
and I think that Squid gave the perfect. He made like some tweet about this a while ago where he was saying like, I'll realize like there's something that I'll struggle with for 5 years, and I'll sit down and fix it in 5 minutes.
That is crazy. Squid said that?
Yes, that was something very, very close to that. Yeah.
Right. That is such a wild concept.
And it's so true. It's ridiculously true. It's like it perfectly describes getting better at Melee, in my opinion. And that's why you have to find these things, because they don't just fix themselves.
I think Albert said to like Nick, he was like, dude, it is actually so easy to be up top 100, and nobody just puts in like the minimum amount of work.
Don't listen to anything Albert says. Albert just started off in a weak region at the time, and he has talent. And he just like pushed it mad far, and then he just like rode ego forever, then ran into me. I like beat him down a ton, and now he's like actually cares about like improving and like thinking of solutions and stuff, but he just still has this like massive like I got good off pure talent ego thing.
Oh man.
See, I love Albert. Don't get me wrong, I love that guy. But like, whenever he's like, it's so easy to get top 100. Well, he's just trying to say that he's smart and talented. And I just usually say, like, you know what, Albert, good job. Like you're valid as like a person, because that's what he's really looking for there.
Yeah, I guess that's what we're all looking for when we say shit like that. Okay. Yeah, interesting. So, all right, let me ask you about commentary in general. I think we're all very critical of commentary. And I think Melee in general is like it's hard to please everyone, because you got the core group of like extremely good players. You got your grinders that play the actual game, and then you got people who don't play the game at all and just watch. And I think all three of those groups, it's the Venn diagram that pleases every single one of those people is actually just Drug Fox talking on commentary.
For me, it's Lovage.
Is it? Okay. Lovage does, yeah. He's in that little triangle as well. But I guess my question is, like, when you're listening to commentary, no matter who it is, what do you think people get wrong the most?
What do people get wrong the most?
And this could be like technical concepts or like larger up, like higher level concepts.
I think like. So first of all, I think commentary in this game is like stupid hard. Like you said, like it's really, really hard to like please all the people involved. Like there are some people, literally their favorite commentary is when the commentators are just memeing about things that aren't the set.
Yeah,
and like
my wheelhouse.
And I think like that's like a fine way to like view it. I don't know. Commentary is kind of weird. Where like I think that like the best like so to be the perfect Melee commentator is like basically as hard as being a perfect Melee player, in the sense that like if you're trying to analyze everything correctly, you need to know everything. It's pretty hard unless, you know, maybe you're Drug Fox.
That's what I'm saying.
And so I think like the perfect way to commentate in Melee is just pick your niche, make it like, you know, nice. It's like the genre of music where your ear has to know like what the payoff sounds like. It's like you just kind of find your niche and you just commentate to that niche like every time. And the people who like you will like you, and the people who don't, you know, don't. I think that's like, in my opinion, that's like the best way to commentate. Is just
that's 100% the way to approach it. Is like, not everyone's gonna love you, and the reasons they don't love you are just as valid as the reasons people do love you, or whatever. But you know what's funny, because I don't think I've ever watched a Melee VOD of mine where, by the way, I actually watch back the one where I beat Ringler like every day,
You beat
but
Ringler?
it was like 2016.
Oh, that's good.
Um, but I will say that I watch commentary like fucking melee VODs because that's just what I see it as a technical skill. So I'm like, oh, I want to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
I
good.
th- I think that what I have found about myself is that when I have the most information at my disposal, it's like a resource, and I can just always say the right thing because I'm fast enough. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean play by play. That just means like contextual
Now I know exactly
understanding.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
And so I guess it's like, I guess the information. That's why I reached out to you because I was like, what information from like someone like Fiction's perspective do you think is lacking in someone like me who has a pretty clear understanding of the game? I don't know what percent up throw knee is best on Marth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I know. I might know a slight range, but that's something I could learn. But
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think, um, and this is obviously really hard to do, but like I think my biggest issue with commentary and the reason I usually mute it is because of like confident misappraisal of situations where like okay, so the first one, the biggest one that bothers me is like attributing player intent when it's not there, of like, oh, like he's thinking that he really has to do this, and it's like, especially when it's like on a set of mine, and I'm like, that was literally nothing to do with what I was thinking,
right,
or like when a player makes like an obvious flub, and then a commentator's like, don't like that decision there, and it's kind of like it's like I get this big friction in my brain of like, like they're looking at like a different thing that I'm looking at completely.
right,
Another one, or like things like somebody misses a fox up air and the commentator's like, oh, the smash the eye, and it's like I understand that it's a lot less hype to just be like, miss the up air there, like, but like,
right. So okay, so that's actually a really good example because that is. Do you think that is easy to see? If
for
when
me,
right, right.
I
I think
don't
so
know, I
too
don't know
because
if, outside of that.
I mean I've been looking at fucking like Fox up airing Puff for as long as 8 years, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I do think when the Puff moves really far over, that's Smash DI. And then when it just doesn't connect, I but I guess I'm not sure. So that's actually a thing. That's like a technical thing I can ask you. When do you know? Is it just the movement of the Puff? And also, is there counterplay? I remember Mike Hayes once said that you can like hit the up air on a side that you think they're going to smash the like left, right, it's a 50-50, and still catch them with the second hit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yeah, so it depends on like the spacing and the drift, because all Smash GI does is it just takes the position of the character and it just literally like shifts them over a certain amount.
Hmm.
So like, and there's like a few frames between the first and second hit. So if and you want to be SDIing the first hit. So if you jump up and you're moving to the right and you hit the first hit and they SDI to the right, they have a way less chance of getting out of the second hit because you're also moving to the right. But if they SDI to the left, they have an even bigger chance of getting out because you're moving to the right. So like the distance between you gets bigger, and so the up air has like a less chance of connecting.
And is that like a read? Like I'm gonna hit him. I'm gonna hit H box on the right
Yeah,
this
no,
time.
it's completely a read.
Got it.
Like most foxes have like 3 different up airs that they do on up their up air to puff. Cody says he has 5, which I believe, um, which is like dash full hop backwards double jump up air, like double like full hop double jump up air, full hop shine turnaround double jump up air. Like
Are
there's
these
a
are these timing mix-ups or positional mix-ups?
um positional mix ups, but like the a lot of times it's kind of muddy. Like there's just positional and timing mix-ups, and you kind of mix those up. Those aren't like an exhaustive list of the situation.
Sure, sure.
So in terms of like, can you see it? It's like, so when the SDI happens, there's this very small window for it to happen because it has to happen during the hit lag frames of the first hit of up air. So there's like a very small like window where you need to see like when the first hit hits Puff, what happens to her body. And an ASDI, so no, if Puff is like not touching the controller at all, when you hit with the up air, after the like during the hit lag of the first hit, there won't be any movement. Puff will just freeze. If it's just ASDI, you'll get the sense that like something has changed, but not really obviously. Like Puff might be slightly more in a different direction than you thought, and I would say that like it's very difficult to necessarily judge whether. Usually, I only know something got ASDI'd because I know what it looks like on no DI, and it
Right.
looks a little different. But then SDI, there's like literally like the character is in a spot and then they've moved over to another spot and it's within like a very specific window of time that it's happened. And so like you just kind of see where the up air hits Puff, and then if she's in a different spot during like within that moment, then you know the SDI happened. And you should be able to see which direction she went too.
Is it so? As far as that situation with Puff, and obviously I'm thinking about Hbox is like the Puff that everyone
Yeah,
watches
that's fine.
most. Is it's like sometimes he'll miss it, and do you
Mm-hmm.
think that smash DIing Fox versus up air is difficult?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
It's not. It's super super easy when the Fox only does one timing.
got it. Okay.
Like I've played Foxes where like I was teaching my friend Fox Puff, and he learned about up throw up air, and he played my Puff, and I SDI'd out of like 20 in a row because he only had one timing. He was just learning. But it's like when people only do one timing, it's the freest thing ever. But when they mix up the timing, it's not reactable. So
Okay, I see.
you kind of just have to go nuts hitting the controller or have a cheater box. So
And identifying that timing is you can see it from what the Fox does on the ground right after the throw. Like
mm,
because it's a delay, right?
you don't really watch.
I'm talking about from a commentator's perspective. Let's say I see this happen, and I see
Yeah.
HBox eat up throw up air, and I see him. You know, he just hit ASDI. He didn't hit the SDI.
Yeah. So what I
And
would, yeah. Okay.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
All I want to say is in that situation, when as soon as Fox hits the up throw, you should immediately be looking only at Puff
What's that?
because that's where the interesting stuff is going to happen. Like
Okay,
Fox
okay.
is either going to stay on the ground and do nothing, or he has to meet Puff in the air. So you can just look at Puff in the air and kind of see what's going on there. You shouldn't be like, oh, they did an up throw. Is Fox going to jump? Because then your eyes have to like follow Fox up on the screen. As soon as the up throw happens, you should like as a Fox player, it like when I up throw Puff, I'm not looking at myself. It's just up throw, and my eyes are just on her the entire time. So when I'm
Right.
watching, like commentating or watching a match, and Puff gets up thrown, I'm exclusively looking at Puff, which is probably why it makes it easier to see the SDI.
I think that's a really powerful thing in terms of like commentary advice because I always say if you don't play the game, you just shouldn't commentate it. But it's like if you need to be looking where the interesting thing is going to happen.
Yes, that's such a good reduction. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I guess I never really thought about it that way because I already play the game. Not that I'm an expert and that I had to learn after 2 years of playing to look at the other character, so it took me a while. But
Took me a
there's
while
this,
too. Don't worry.
there's that there. I think that's really a good way to look at it. All right, let's talk about. I guess I like because of the players that I know are going to Summit. It's good to get a perspective of someone like kind of like a couple thoughts of like what makes this person unique. What's their biggest strength, their biggest weakness, and so like first starting with Zane, like what makes Zane the best?
Mm. Same reason Armada was the best when he played. He has the strongest autopilot, and it's from an absurd amount of grinding, like by far more than anybody else does.
You say autopilot. Does that mean it takes a certain level of player to like break that and make him start thinking?
Well, if you recall the summit that Mango won with Fox, that's exactly what happened.
How
Is
so?
Mango and Zane will basically say it too. Mango took him out of his practice and put him into the uncomfortable space of just kind of player mix up and beat him there. So Zane didn't really get to use his strength of like constant practice autopilot. And that's why Zane is the strongest at punishing the obvious options, because he just grinds autopilot all the time. Which is, every top player grinds autopilot, but Zane grinds it more, and that's why he's better.
Interesting. So it's okay, just like an extreme consistent, like Armada.
It's it's the extreme level of consistency and like knowing of being able to like rely on yourself to hit things just from doing it like all the time and being like fairly repetitive. Like Zane told me that like the grand majority of his practice, like 90%, is just playing completely mindless. And
That's crazy.
And I think that's true of like, that's how, look at Mango on his stream. That is the way to train your autopilot. The problem is that people, like, they just play the game a bunch and they want to get good. But that's not how you get good. That's how you solidify your skill. So Zane is sitting here every day analyzing, putting together stuff. But then when he plays, it's like, he'll very carefully implement something and then just mindlessly grind it for like a million hours until it's built into his nervous system. And that's like the key difference between, somebody who's bad playing for 12 hours mindlessly and Zane doing it is because he's only playing mindlessly after he's already like put a bunch of new stuff in that he needs to like compress down.
Okay, that actually just blew my mind. That is such a that is such a great way to think about it, because the analogy I immediately went to is like, let's say so playing the game is how you solidify your skill, but getting better happens when you aren't playing the game in terms of like being more skilled.
Well,
So
it
it's
happens
not,
in terms of analysis and implementation. So implementation is still playing the game, but it's not the same as like practicing the game. It's very like awkward, and like you'll lose to people a lot worse than you as you're trying to force yourself to put in this new thing that you worked on, and then you kind of just play a lot to like get it solidified.
it's like if you're making a clay statue, and then you have to put it in the kiln, right? The clay
Mm-hmm.
molding it is you doing the analysis
Exactly.
and the implementation, and then it being in the kiln is just you fucking playing. And
Exactly.
okay.
And a lot of people, they just put the blob in the kiln, and they're just like, "Let's go!" And it's like,
why does my statue look like shit?
yeah, and it's like, dude, I put it in there just as long as Zane did,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, me and Zane had the same amount of kiln hours. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Why am I losing to Blur? Blur's good now. That's what no one wants to admit. Okay.
What the real thing that nobody wants to admit is Blur's always been good.
That is not, dude. It's just not true.
It is true.
I saw that man lose to Heisenberg.
Nah, see, the problem is he's a mental child in terms of playing the game. Not in terms of real life necessarily. Maybe a little bit, but
So he has a block.
But in the game, like, I mean, I would play Blur. The joke in 2014 was that Blur was the best Marth in the world for the first stock of the set.
Good point.
And he was good. He was very good. He was the only Marth in the world who could consistently, like, hack stash. He had all these little solves, all these really interesting situations. He was fast. He just doesn't know how to, like, win tournament sets or, like, stay in the zone or, like, not crumble at all. So, like, I don't think Blur is any... Like, he might be a little bit better than he used to be. Like, he might be better, but in some ways, like, he was always good. I always tried to tell him that he was good. He just needed to get over his mental stuff. And I'd be like, so what'd you do yesterday? And he's like, I just sat in training mode and ground out Marth tech skill for 8 hours. And I was like, 8 hours? And he like straight? And he's like, yeah, I just sit there, do infinite timer, and just grind. And it's like, I was like top 15 at that point, and I was like, I've never done that. Like,
So, it's interesting because I think a lot about what you said about Jmook, and he would do like run up, crouch up, tilt, and it was beating none.
mm-hmm.
And you said if that doesn't work the first time and he gets like grab 0 to death or something, that it made me think of that you describing Blur, because it's like maybe that just happened every time, or maybe every time he got hit he felt that level of like, uh-oh, this isn't working. and he just never fortified that.
I
So
wish
he's
it
like
was that
me.
simple.
Okay,
The
how so?
man's mind is a labyrinth. It's just
That's true.
I've seen him lose so many times in the ways where it's like he'll just start out, and I'm like I used to really care about his improvement in like 2014 before I kind of like not gave up on it, but like I kind of it was when I first kind of encountered him, and I was like, wait, this guy could be really good. Like, come
Yeah,
on,
you
Blur,
have it. Yeah.
and he knew he could be really good, and it was just like okay, like I was kind of like waiting for it, and like I would watch him play, and it just the first stock would be like perfect, like nothing has failed. Like he would zero death someone on their first stock after 30 seconds of perfect neutral game. And then they just come back on the Angel platform and he just like doesn't remember what he's like what to do. It boggles the mind. I stopped thinking about it a long time ago.
Well, shouts out. I hope he. I mean, I do think Slippy. Not to stay on Blur too long. I do think Slippy made him. It's like you're no, you're the most comfortable in your own goddamn house. You
Oh,
know.
definitely. No, there was
So
a period I could pull up the DM where it was like maybe 6 months ago. I played Blur on unranked and I was like, "There's no way this is Blur." Like
really,
he was hitting me with stuff that Zane's never hit me with.
that's so sick.
And
Actually,
then 5 games in, he just started getting like almost JV5'd every time, and I was like, "It is Blur."
that's how you knew.
No, that is how I knew. I knew it was Blur because it started going downhill really fast. But I still hold out hope. I love Blur, and I hope that you know some people are late bloomers, and
That's right,
some people bloom early, fail,
Albert.
bloom again, fail again, and then late bloom, fail again, and then late bloom, and then they're in their prime. So you never know.
All right. What about? So we talked about Zane and like and
Also, okay, really quick. So we're
no,
almost
go
at an
ahead.
hour. Do you want to go longer and then just count the time, or are
Yeah,
you?
I think what would be good for me is actually a half hour longer, and then we'll
Okay,
do
great.
another
All right,
call.
let me go use the bathroom
That work
really
for you?
quick, and then I'll be
No problem.
back. I'll be back for like the last half hour.
Okay.
Real sick. Okay, I'm back.
Um, so as far as Zane and all of his strengths, I feel like that Leffen is sort of the Fox version of that. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that? Like
I'll need more. My
the
immediate
same
impulse is
reasons
to
that
disagree, but I need to know what you mean.
okay, the same reasons that Zane is good are the same reasons that Leffen is good.
Disagree.
Okay. What's your thoughts then? What as a follow up, what makes Leffen special as a player?
Hmm. I think Leffen. Let's see. I don't think Leffen is necessarily like the person who gets good. Like he doesn't. I don't think he ever ground as much as Zane grinds now. Even though I'm sure he's done a lot. I think Leffen excels a lot more. Like Leffen is a challenger more than like a dominator. I think Leffen works really well by like seeing someone or something that he wants to like destroy and then just sort of obsessing about how he can go about destroying that thing, whether it's like a player or a character or a style or any new game he touches. Like he doesn't I don't think he just like shows up like I think I'll get good at, DB Fighter Z or whatever. I think he shows up like, these are these top players in this game, and I want to obliterate them. How am I going to do that? What are they doing better than me? And I need to figure that out so I can destroy them. And I think that's kind of how Leffen sees the game. And, like, I think Zane is a lot. He chases with a lot less malice.
Right, yeah. His engine is powered by a different fuel.
Like, yeah, like I think Zane just really likes playing Melee, and he wants to, and he feels like he has the ambition to practice and be good enough at the game to win. It's a lot less powered by negativity, I think. And it's interesting, there's only two types of players. There's people who get sad when they lose and people who get angry. And Zane is a big time sad loser, and Leffen is like a big angry loser.
Yeah, yeah.
So that kind of tells you already the emotional fuel that they use to get through life as a whole is just very different.
And how does that manifest in Leffen's, for instance, like his play style, right? Like, or maybe it doesn't, but like, if you're watching a Fox on screen, you don't know who is, there's no player cams. How do you know it's Leffen?
I think there's nothing necessarily that makes Leffen's style extremely distinct. I think that's part of. I don't even want to say it's part of. I think it's this has nothing to do with it. He plays White Fox, and neutral Fox is very much associated among Fox players with like lacking biases. Like you don't really have like a style you want to force on the game. It's very.
Wait, is there Fox like skin theory?
Yeah.
Oh my god. Well, I've always said green foxes are the lamest.
Well, yeah. So green Fox, their goal is to play theoretically perfect. Which is why it often comes off as lame. Red Fox is you want to be aggro, angry. That one's been true for a long time. Blue Fox is you really enjoy the feeling of Fox moving. So it comes off as sort of like a burst speed / like my speed is cool type feeling. And yeah, and then neutral is like very like lack of biases, like you want to go for like very solid options and stuff like that.
That is so insane. This theory exists.
Yeah, the theory exists, and it's also like kind of terrifyingly like accurate. And somebody in the chat said, does this apply to Falco? So I have not personally found any sort of correlation with Falco mains, except that blue Falco tends to be a little more nerdy and laser heavy in general. Not always. But if I run into a blue Falco on unranked, the chances of them like playing like a rushdown style are a little bit lower. But it's
so crazy.
But it's not nearly as it's the funny thing is I actually switched from green Fox to blue Fox when my mentality changed on Fox. And when I came back to Fox after my 3-year break, I actually started again as Green Fox because I felt like I needed to learn the new meta in terms of like technical and like things like that. And then I told people, well, once I'm at the level again where I feel like I'm playing the game at a competent level, I'll go back to blue where I can start being more like expressive.
That is so interesting.
That's just how I see it.
It provides a mix up because let's say you're in a game and it's like a set and it's like game 4 and you switch your color, and it's like now there's an expectation you might play like a green Fox for this game.
It definitely makes Falco dittos against Ginger awkward, or another blue Falco, because I have to play green and he has to play neutral, and we're both playing blue Falco, but it feels kind of wrong.
Right, yeah, because you're both spiritually blue Falco.
Yeah, we're both playing blue Falco, but with these like neutral and green colors, and it's like, ugh. But I don't know. I haven't played Falco long enough to have like perfect Falco theory. My Fox color theory though is on point.
I have a question I've thought about a lot. Is let's say that two people play all the time, like let's say, or maybe not even all the time, but like, okay, Nun and Johnny, they're playing a Falco Ditto. or Falcon Ditto,
Hmm.
and they've played before. They played enough times to know each other and how each other plays. How do you prepare for a match against someone that you've played like 10 times in the past 2 years?
Okay, so targeting someone is like a completely different thing than like getting better at the game. So like you can the way I like to describe it is like, and this is true in anything, like any competitive field, is like, prep is like super broken. Like,
Yeah.
the way I describe it is like, if the match is 25 minutes long, like you play a 25-minute best of 5, you get 25 minutes of time to think about their options. But if you prep for 2 hours, you had 2 hours and 25 minutes to think about their options, which
Right.
is a significant advantage over your opponent. Um, so, like, I think if I'm really trying to beat somebody, and I haven't gotten to this level with Falco at all, I only really entered this stage as Fox right before quarantine started. Um, where I was like, okay, it's time, and you start just writing out. You start thinking about everything they do. You start it out the same way you get better at the game. You look at things that repeat. What's repeating here? Then you look at sets they lost. Do they crumble in a certain way? Do they have momentum in a certain way? You start looking at sets they won. You start looking at situations they lost. You start thinking about, what stages they like. Um, a lot of it gets, I don't know, it gets kind of dirty, where you start just being like, okay, like, I notice, when somebody tilts them, they have more of like a problem, and so, like, I need to think about like what might tilt them the most and be like ready to capitalize on that tilt. Like,
Right.
it gets
I mean, you're just
the
looking for advantages,
the I would say that, like, PPMD really brought this to the game, back when he played, and I would say that, like, there hasn't been as much of that since. I think I started doing it right at the end. Mewtwo King is also really big on it, but I don't think he's quite as good at it because he doesn't really take into account a lot of like emotional factors, and a lot of it is more like situational. And then, like, a lot of I just remember, and like, Mewtwo King, like, he denied this last time I brought it up, but I have the text logs where he like messaged me like a month before Evo 2015, planning out his first combo on Leffen.
that is so funny.
And he's like, okay, so when I grab him at 0, he's always ready to DI away the forward throw. And he's like, but I've watched some of Leffen's matches, and he doesn't usually tech the down throw at 0. So I'll start with a down throw jab reset. He's like, okay, then I'm gonna regrab and go for the up throw. And at that point, and he's just planned out the whole stock, his
That is
whole first
insane.
combo against Leffen a month before the tournament. And it's like, that is a level that is, most people will never reach in terms of preparation. And he beat
Yeah.
Leffen at the tournament, as far as I
Yeah.
remember. No, 2015, did he? I think so.
Someone could verify.
There was a tournament where whatever tournament it was for, he did well. He didn't do the combo he planned out. 2015 he didn't go. Okay, it wasn't 2015 then. I don't have a perfect memory, but
Do you think that
it was very interesting. Oh yeah, go ahead.
in terms of like the top like the summit type of player that would be there? I guess like the top, not like, because I think people who are like tier 2 are going to be preparing a lot. But who do you think prepares the most in this way of like targeting, and who do you think does it the least?
I actually don't know because no one shares.
Interesting. Okay.
um, Most likely HBox does it the least because he needed Crunch to do it. Like,
Sure.
no shade, like, literally. I
Yeah,
don't I
that's what
don't
he's
think
for.
HBox is very good at like analyzing VODs for like habits and stuff, at least based on like what he's said and stuff like that.
Um, and that leads me to another question of like the summit environment, or even just any tournament where everyone's together. You sit down. Let's say it's like, you know, uh, Cody and Mango sit down, and they play friendlies for an hour, and then they have to go play. 15 minutes later in tournament,
Mm-hmm.
maybe top 8. how does that factor in from the perspective of the player that has just played this person for an hour? Is it all data gathering?
Honestly, if I play a person for an hour before the set, like you've both shown your hands so hard that at that point you just go into the set trying to play well, which I think is what gives Cody such a massive advantage at summits.
Because of his consistency?
Because he's the type of player who can play for 6 hours and then he's in peak form.
Right.
And I think he can kind of, I don't know. It felt very obvious to me at the last summit. It was the summit Cody won where he beat Amsa. I think it was just the one that Cody won, but he played Amsa, and like they had been playing a lot of friendlies, and it was just really obvious because Cody was like way too prepared for certain patterns that Amsa had,
Right.
and
It,
yeah.
do you think there's a value then? Because like HBox often gets shit for this, where he like just won't play people. But it's like, if that's the strategy to win, your job is to win. Do you think there's a value in withholding information by not playing with people at tournaments?
If yes and no. I think there is value in it, and I think particularly for HBox it helps a lot. Um, because of the way he kind of plays and stuff like that.
Right, and his character, I think.
And his character, yes, definitely. Like no one, yeah. But let me think.
I guess. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think a lot of it is kind of like the idea of, I don't know, like if you're hiding something, it kind of distracts you from the game in a lot of ways, where
Right.
like
Okay.
you're thinking too hard about your little trick, and if you don't hit your little trick you're probably gonna lose, and or like at least focusing on your little trick might make you worse. I don't think, like, rather than hiding information, it would be better to spend like, okay, here's the best way to say it. Unless you're like HBox, or I would say you play like a lower tier character, like Amsa kind of treats Yoshi like he's not a lower tier character, but I do think he would have benefited like not grinding against Cody.
Right.
But I think I'm kind of losing it. Well, let's see, where was I? I was talking about yeah, that if you're playing like a lower tier character or whatever, it might be different, or you're playing like Puff or something. But generally, information gathering trumps information hiding because of how fast and like complicated the game is. So a lot of times, like hiding something small is not necessarily as strong as spending the time learning what your opponent does. I think that the game is really weird in this way where you want as much info and you want as much practice. So basically, yes, hiding information is good. It's really hard to tell how much and when it's beneficial. I have accused Zane of this in the past. He denies it quite a bit. And Cody also agrees with me. There's where Zane will grind with Cody, and he like specifically won't use options that he'll use in a set when he plays him later.
Yeah,
And Zane swears he's not hiding the info, and that like it's just in tournament the pressure's on and then I do this. But like the effect is the same as hiding the info because he's like conditioning Cody to do something different. So yes, if like you are completely victory minded, then maybe it's the best to hide info and stuff like that. But I would say like the grand majority of the time, tournaments are just won by who's playing the best and not by information hiding. And I think that all the top players kind of know that. And so there's this idea that like, yeah, you could maybe hide some information and like maybe grime out a win, but like if you're the smartest, coolest, best player, grinding against the other players should only benefit you.
Right. Okay.
And so I think that all the players kind of have that mentality that, like, I will simply be the strongest and the best. And I think that mentality is a lot of times why those players kind of got there in the first place rather than kind of going for sneaky stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that some small degree of sneaky stuff, it's just weird because at the highest level, very small things can like make a difference. Like just things that you would have no idea about, like, oh, somebody, you know, they had to wake up in the middle of the night to pee and they couldn't go back to sleep, and so
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
won the tournament. And so there's like all these little things, and like, it's like, well, we're going out to eat, but I want them to be hungry, so we're not going to invite them to eat. Ha ha ha. Like,
Has this happened?
what I'm saying is that no one who attends tournaments is like this except for $100. And so, like, if that works for him, great. But for the rest of the people, I don't think they're really going to be thinking like that. And I think it is definitely beneficial. Sometimes, hard to tell how much. I can't really say that much more about it. I don't do it.
Right.
So,
Okay. On the subject of HBox in terms of like 2017 and how he was like so unreal dominant,
mm-hmm.
what in that period, if you can remember back, what was it that he was doing that just made him so dominant? Was it like just consistency alone?
Everyone was just really bad.
Yeah.
And I think that HBox is really, really good. So obviously, HBox should still be like competing at a top 5 level for sure. Like, he's super, super good. But I do think that it's just like, he punished Fox full hop out of the corner for like 4 years straight, and not a single time was somebody like, we should full hop double jump instead, or we should go to ledge and ledge dash instead. The game was just really different back then, and people didn't like take things that kept going wrong and fix them. They just kind of wanted to just win by playing. It's just so weird to say it now because it seems so obvious, but that was really not the way like things went. Like, if you watch it, he won a lot of sets off the exact same things. Of just
So
people
great.
kind of getting hit by the same mix-ups over and over. And it's like, not to completely downplay what the other top players were doing, but it was kind of like a thing where like the meta was at a point where like if you wanted to really super hard solve these situations, it was going to take a lot of effort. There wasn't like Uncle Punch and stuff like that. The only player who really had the dedication to sit there and do it was Armada.
And do you think that the acceleration of the meta is due to the tools that we have?
Yes, definitely. Like, without question.
Like undeniably.
Yeah, undeniably. We would very much be living in like a slightly upgraded 2017 Melee if things didn't change.
So as far as Axe, he's like once Slippy came out, it was Axe's like, it was his flop era, unfortunately, right? After being
Mm-hmm.
fairly dominant for like years and years. Do you think that is also attributed to just like the skill floor raising up with the tools and stuff?
No, I think the players that depend heavily on pressure to win perform significantly less good online. Uh, like, I think like Mango and Zane have talked about it before, where like HBox really likes to rely on like kind of like you're next to him energy, like the whole Zane HBox grunting thing. Like, that is like a real thing that does make him significantly stronger to sit next to than to play against online, because he can't gauge someone's emotional state and try to like abuse it.
Right.
Similar for me, to be honest. I think I get a little bit more out of people's body language in game than most people, but still, like, my main strength, I think, is kind of like abusing emotional states in game. Um,
Would you
I
say you're susceptible to that? Or do you think, because I
the
think that you're one of the more emotive players on a player cam.
I'm susceptible when people have high degrees of physical energy during a set, and it's something that I've been working on trying to fix. When they just feel very like amped, like they're
Okay.
just amped over every interaction, and they're just like every single hit, they're just like sweating, and their body's like really tight, and it's just like so much intense energy coming off. And I have a tendency to want to match that energy, and that's a flaw that I've been working on quite a bit the last few months,
Interesting.
because it was certainly an issue for me, especially with Falco. Like since switching to Falco, because he was new and unfamiliar, and I would get
Yeah.
kind of anxious and throw out a move or something like that. And I think Axe is really, really one of those players. Like I think like he feeds off of the crowd, and he feeds off of his opponent's fear a lot, and it's just like characters like Pikachu, he's not winning the game by like, having a bigger rock than you, or he's just like, oh, like my so much power. He's winning the
Right.
game by like manipulating you into into a mental state where, because I felt it again at Genesis when I played him, where, and in my opinion, it's a lot of it is just matchup. Like, I don't think I would have been thrown off by his energy if I had more experience in the matchup. But the way he was moving and the crowd yelling and my inexperience with Pikachu's platform game a little bit, it kind of I was definitely like trying really hard to like adapt to it, but it was so hard to think because he was moving really fast and the crowd was yelling a lot. And
Right.
I think that those types of things benefit him. They benefit the players who are the best at using them, And I think Axe has like always been a player who's really good at using pressure and the crowd and all those things. And when he's just sitting online against somebody who's, in their room and they're chilling and there's no crowd on the line and they've entered 45 weeklies in the last 3 days, and they're just like, I can beat Pikachu, and they're just kind of throwing out buttons. I
Right.
think that is significantly harder to deal with than for him than like, in tournament, you know, somebody's on the big stage, they're sweating, he gets a gimp, and then he dash dances really fast, and then does like an up B edge cancel, and it's like it's a lot harder to like deal with those things in person.
Do you did were you more did you feel more comfortable in your set against Cody at Genesis?
Because it was off stream.
Yeah, oh, it just in general.
No, I felt more comfortable because it's Fox,
Got it. Okay.
and I have a lot more experience against Fox from playing a lot against Kalindi.
Okay. Yeah, do you think that oh man. So it's kind of interesting. It's like I feel like particularly Axe and HBox hit different ceilings, right? Where we kind of don't expect HBox to win it all anymore, at least as much as we did.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I
we
don't
don't expect
want to.
Axe to get where he is. I'm just saying it from the perspective of someone who watches more than they play at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm trying to put together the pattern where it's like something that both of these players have is like a weaker character. And I guess my question is, do you think having a weaker character in terms of like the level of Puff or Pikachu, having that it necessitates a need to play off of emotional intensity and in-person energy?
It doesn't necessitate it, but the types of players who succeed with less good characters are those who are better at those types of things, because otherwise, like, you don't really become as good as, Axe with Pikachu by just being good at Pikachu. Pikachu's not as good. So you have to
Right.
have something else to kind of get to that level.
So it's not a causation, but it is a correlation.
It's like a survivorship bias type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Where it's like, yeah, there aren't any other top level puffs, so it's like, the guy who's really good at manipulating people in game, like, sorry, in person, like when they're sitting next to him at the game, those are the types of people that are going to be able to excel with those less good characters.
Last question, and then I'll let you go.
Okay. Yeah.
Plup, what makes him special?
He's a gamer.
He is a gamer.
He's like a Cody. He has the reflexes, and he has really fast calculations, and
When you
that's
say
kind of
calculations,
like, given like an unpredictable scramble occurs, Plup will always react with something at least pretty good instantly. Like instantly. Like
how much better do you
stupid
think his
fast.
reactions are than I guess other people? 20% better.
It's not about his reaction time. It's about situational reaction.
Okay.
And
Decision making.
compared to like a normal player, like for instance, like I played Crudo on NetPlay last night, and he's good and he makes almost all the same good decisions as Plup does in the Falco matchup, and it's just a completely different beast, like immeasurably different. But good gamer sense does not always win. So Plup being
Can you try it?
I just have a bunch of different names for Plup. I just call him like Doctor Cracked, John Cracked, Mister Cracked, Professor Cracked. I just anything with cracked on it because that's just his thing. He's just cracked. Plup is just super duper duper cracked. That's like his whole thing.
And like to describe that, that just means like possesses a just a giant amount of talent.
Yeah, kind of.
Like what? How would you describe Plup being cracked? Like what does that? What does that mean?
Like Plup can beat the majority of players on this planet with only Sheik's like jab, forward tilt, and forward air, and that would be like he's taken plenty of games from me on unranked with extremely simple stuff like jab and forward tilt, and it's just because he jabs you, you both kind of reset. And he will move extremely fast. If he dashes away and you whiff a move, he is going to come back in and punish it. If he decided to do a move, it's coming out frame 1. If he decides on some other option, and you choose like a totally different option, he will react to the new situation that has been created out of that extremely fast. And that's kind of like just like the Plup wall, which is why I think he sometimes doesn't perform as well as he could. Because I think that in terms of like the whole expectation game and stuff like that, he's pretty lacking. I've never really felt like super mind gamed by him, or like Plup is just he's just gonna, like I don't know if you've read Hunter x Hunter or anything, but it's like I don't know if you have, but basically he just has like a type of energy that is based entirely on like in Hunter x Hunter, it's just like you just augment your physical strength and speed, things that are very focused on just strength and speed, and that's Plup.
Got it. Okay.
Plup
Yeah.
doesn't have any sort of like special secret gimmick power or anything like that, and he doesn't really work on like a framework of like trickery. It's just like he's
Fucking
just super cracked. Like every time I play him, I'll out decision make him a bunch of times, and I just lose because there were so many situations where I was 3 frames late on my wave dash, and he took my stock.
That's crazy.
And so it's just like, to beat Plup, you just have to be at a level of execution and then outplay him. If you're not at that level of execution, you will lose. And if you are at that level of execution, it's still hard because he's just never turns it off. he's just crazy. Like, but I don't think he's the most threatening player in the world just because it is just strength and speed in the end,
So
that is my opinion.
Plup is Melee's greatest, strongest Chad.
Yeah, no, it's just he's kind of like a different Cody. They're both really similar in the sense that it's just pure gamer sense. Although I think Plup is a bit more on the talent side and Cody's a bunch more on the hard work side.
Right.
Like Cody's cracked because he wants to be. Like obviously he can't turn it off, but I think Cody like wants it. Like he's like, oh, I'm gonna grind and I'm gonna get extra cracked. And I feel like Plup just touches the game and he's just like situation. Like you can see it anytime he picks up a new game. He's just nuts. Like
Yeah.
He's just a really crazy gamer.
So sick. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll let you go. I'll hit you up for the other half.
Okay.
Of
Yeah, awesome.
what
I think that was a
going
really
on.
interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this is really cool. I got a lot of notes, and I'm just trying to just understand things better. So I
Okay, yeah, I feel
appreciate
like
it.
there's so much more we can talk about next time too.
Yeah, same. Yeah, if you have any also things you want to talk about in particular, and I'll have a couple more questions as well and stuff. So,
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
all right, man, take it easy.
Awesome. Yeah, have a good one. Peace.